back to another video on the 67 Stang channel. So today is going to be a video that's not about the car, but today, March 28th, probably a week after a week before you're watching this video, is a very special day for me and at least 5,000 other folks that I know. On this day, March 28th, the Saratoga Battle Group returned to our home port in Mayport, Florida, after being deployed for over 8 months for the Desert Shield Desert Storm deployment. So this is a day that means a lot to me personally, because I'll be honest, it's one of the greatest days of my life. It was a day that I will never forget. I rank it up there with the day I got married to my amazing wife. Obviously, the day I was born, which was pretty special many years ago. So I wanted to share this memory with you, my viewers, subscribers, as well as to have it as something that my family can look back on later. And have, as part of the family lore and history, I guess. So let me go back 30 years ago in a day when we were still a day out from arriving in Mayport. So here I was on board the aircraft carrier USS Saratoga. We had been deployed for Desert Shield, Desert Storm. We literally deployed a week after Saddam Hussein had invaded Kuwait. We were one of the first U.S. military units that were over there. And as I said in my previous video that recognized the 30th anniversary of the start of the Desert Storm, Desert Shield conflict, we went across at flank speed. Given the fact that the Sarah was one of the oldest aircraft carriers out there, it had been commissioned in the mid-50s, was part of the Forrestal class, the first real super carriers. It was pretty amazing that when we were crossing, that the only ships that could really keep up with us was the USS Wisconsin, an Iowa-class battleship from World War II, and the cruiser USS Biddle. Again, a cruiser that was built, I believe, in the 60s. That all the other more modern Aegis cruisers and Spruance destroyers and all that were not able to really keep up with us, which I thought was pretty phenomenal and kind of funny, right? It instilled a sense of pride in our ship. And I don't think we'd had that before, because to us it was the sorry Sarah. She'd just come out of the yards, and again, we thought we were on an old ship. It wasn't one of the newfangled Nimitz class carriers. It wasn't a nuke. So I kind of feel like we had somewhat of a lack of pride, but then going across and being able to lead the pack and outrun the newer ships, I think start to put a bigger sense of pride. It just continued to grow during that whole deployment. And as, again, I said in that other video, we experienced a lot during the Desert Storm deployment. We had the ferry boat accident that I described in there, where we lost a number of shipmates in a non-combat related situation where we were supposed to be having fun and relieving stress, and then that happened. And then, of course, during the actual conflict, we had some of the first casualties with some of our aircraft getting shot down, and actually losing a couple, and then a couple of pilots or aviators being taken prisoner. But we, over that time, developed a sense of pride. The Saratoga, while we were there, and I'm going to you can hear the rain, I'm sorry, but it's a dreary weekend, but I wanted to shoot this on this anniversary. The Sarah never was in a situation where she didn't perform her duties. That the missions assigned to her, we always carried out, right? There were situations where some of the other carriers that were there with us in the Red Sea had mechanical issues, material that made us have to take some of their missions. So even though the Sarah was one of the oldest carriers over there, it wasn't the oldest, there was the Midway, which was in the Persian Gulf, not the Red Sea, but the Midway was the oldest one over there. But we were one of the oldest, and we were always ready. We were always doing ISOs. I'm busy now. Okay, you just need to stop. Lighten the mood a little bit with a cat, right? So that just always being there, always able to step up and get things done, really instilled an esprit de corps, I think, in our crew and pride in our ship. The fact that she was one of the oldest, but she kept going, she was there, we were always doing things, I think really made us proud. I know it did me. I can't really speak for the other, 4,999 crewmen on board the ship, but I know it did me. So, having gone through all that, being deployed for many of us, that was the longest we had ever been away from home. I know I had not been away from home without, weekend liberty and all that kind of thing for the eight and a half months that we were deployed over there. It forced a lot of us to grow up, and myself included. I really think that cruise did more to make me the man I am now, with that desire to get things done, support the mission, work as a team, put others above my own needs, that willingness to do whatever it took to get the job done. I think a lot of that came from that cruise. And it's the reason I've been able to make so much progress on this car and tackle challenges. So, again, as you can imagine, having been gone that long for the very first time, trying to come back when you had been limited to, letters, occasional phone calls when we hit ports. But those port visits were few and far between for this cruise because of the conflict that was going on. So that coming home, oh my God, we were so, when we finally were relieved, I think by the Eisenhower Battle Group, maybe, I can't remember exactly which carrier relieved us. But once we got relieved, we knew we were coming home. The excitement level on the ship skyrocketed. We started countdowns. Right, we had so many days in a wake up till we hit home. The whole vibe of the ship changed. I mean, we were always excited about doing our job, doing our mission. And whatnot, and we were good with that, and we would have stayed there longer if we had to, without a lot of, I don't say we wouldn't have complained, because sailors have to complain. If sailors and soldiers aren't complaining, then there's something definitely wrong, and anybody in the service, or has been, will be able to attest to that. But when we got the word we were coming home, things, it just changed. It was almost like Christmas Eve, right? That anticipation, that fun, good anxiety was there, and we started doing that. So I remember we came out, did our sixth pass through the Suez Canal, which set a record for a cruise for a U.S. warship. 6 transits through. In one deployment was a record. I don't know if that still stands or not, but we did it. And coming through the Med, and then coming out the Straits of Gibraltar. Once we exited the Straits of Gibraltar, that's like when it really dawned, this is happening. We are going home. And coming across, I remember I had, I don't think I get in trouble for this now. So I had rigged up a way we could plug a CD player or a Discman, not a Discman, Walkman into the internal communication system in the ship. So we could play music on a secret channel that only us lower enlisted guys supposedly knew about. I have a sneaking suspicion some of the chiefs were probably aware of this, but for morale purposes and the fact that as long as we're getting our jobs done, they kind of turned the other way. So we were playing music and we would swap it out, whatever. But I did figure out I could actually pipe it through a radio channel, through our, radio comms. So as we were across the Atlantic, I know I started broadcasting radio songs to the rest of the battle crew. Played Motley Crue's Home Sweet Home, for example. Anything that was like about going home, I tried to find songs and play it. That lasted for a few days until we did get busted. Somebody found it, and one of the chiefs had to take it away. I wasn't the one to watch, and I don't remember who got in trouble for that. I know one of my shipmates, Greg Gaetano, who served with me in OI Division, may remember this. I want to think it was Sir Pong Reed, another petty officer with me, that was actually on watch when it got busted. He kind of got in trouble for it. But he, of course, didn't rat me out because shipmates don't do that. So anyway, that was kind of a neat thing. So as we're coming across, we get to the night before we're supposed to pull in. So with the carrier being as big, we always had to pull in at high tide because the draft or the depth of the hole was like 32 to 33, maybe even 34 feet. So that's from the water line down to the very bottom of the keel of the ship. And the depth of Mayport Naval Basin was about that at low tide. So we couldn't really come in. So we had to come in high tide, so we had a couple of feet under the keel when we pulled in. So we got off the coast of Florida the night before, and we were steaming, and it was kind of nerve-wracking because you could actually go out on deck and see the lights of the coastline of Florida and Georgia. So it's like just there, you could almost touch it, but you weren't there yet. And of course, that day before, most of the air wing flew off. So the carrier, when you pull into a port, your home port, and you're not going to be getting out of the way again for a while, you flew all the aircraft that were capable of flying off. So you launch them all, and then they go to their home bases, which may be up in Oceana, up in Virginia. They may be out on the West Coast, Whidbey Island, wherever the squadron's home base was. They would, they fly off. And so they got off before we did, at least the pilots in the airplanes. All the squadron crew stayed on board and didn't leave until we pulled in. But anyway, so we sat there, so I don't think anybody slept. I remember they called away the sea and anchor detail somewhere around 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. And so I served on the radar navigation team. So what we did was we helped navigate the ship using radar. Being that close to land, we would identify known points along the land, take a measurement from us to that point, and then use that to triangulate our position. And from there, we could make recommendations to the bridge on course and speeds based on our proposed track into port. So we were back up to the quartermasters, which were up on the bridge and the signal bridge up in the island of the ship that were taking visual observations. So they had, gosh, I can't even think of the name of it, but basically they had an instrument that they could look at that was on a compass, that they could sight in on a point on land, get a bearing to that point, and again, they would take, get 3 or more of those bearings, and where they cross, again, triangulate a position of visual reference. We were the backup because radar, while good, is not as accurate as getting, the exact point of, say, a piece of land that juts out, or a lighthouse or something like that, as a visual representation was. At least that was the thought. So I was on the radar nav team. We were down in CDC in the anti-surface warfare module. That's where we were running it instead of, sometimes we ran it up in co-plot, the captain's plot, which was located just behind the bridge. But for this time, we were running it down in CDC, or the Combat Direction Center, formerly known as CIC, Combat Information Center. And I don't know what it's called now. Short was called Combat. So we were down there. I was the assistant radar nav officer. I was one of the only, well, I think I may have been at that time, the only enlisted person below the rank of chief that had qualified as a radar nav officer. But because I was just an E5, the captain wouldn't let me be the radar nav officer, which I fully get. The captain's responsible for everything that happens on the ship. Y'all may remember again talking about the ferry boat acts, or no. No, that was a later cruise. I haven't talked about that, where we accidentally shot the Turkish destroyer. I don't think I've talked about that. That's a story for another time. Anyway, captain got held responsible for that incident. So anything happens on the ship, even though he's up on the bridge and maybe 12, 15 stories away from whatever happened, he's always responsible. So I get why he'd want to make sure somebody with more experience and higher rank was running the show. I get it. I would have done the same thing. But anyway, I was the assistant radar nav officer, so I was helping as the guy working the radar was calling. I was working to plot the locations where we were at, and then the actual radar nav officer, which was Chief Warrant Officer Prentice, if I remember correctly, was making our recommendations for course and speed adjustments back to the bridge, or just agreeing with what the officer of the deck and the navigator were giving based on the quartermaster's measurements. And that was probably, God, that had to be the longest sea anchor detail I've ever been on. I thought we would never get there. At some point, we got what we call landlocked. Basically, the radar was just so cluttered by land return that we couldn't really disseminate anything to the point we could measure and determine a location. So we got permission to secure the radar nav watch, and that's where I went up on deck. Now, we were all dressed in dress uniforms, dress whites. So that would be the crackerjack, well, not the crackerjacks, but the white sailor with the flap on the back, and the white hat, which I still got my white hat that I wore. It's upstairs. I should have brought that down. I also had the Saratoga ball cap that I wore all during the Desert Storm deployment upstairs. I should have brought it down. So we came down, they were manning the rails. So what I'm going to do, and I've also got another picture of this, but this is the cruise book, and y'all have seen this before from that deployment. And in here is a picture of what we returned home to, if I can find it. In here, I just had it, of course, not that long ago. Yep, there it is. This here is us pulling in on March 28th, that morning, coming back from Desert Storm. When this picture was taken, I was walking on, I guess we were in Cracker Jacks. Sorry, I thought we were wearing our whites. No, we were in our dress blue Cracker Jacks. I don't know why I got that messed up. But I was somewhere, probably in this group, just walking around on the flight deck because I had the radar nav detail, so I wasn't part of the crew that was stationed to man the rails. So all of our external areas that were visible from the pier had sailors, all this out there on the sponsons, along the flight deck, and so on. As well as I think we had bunting put up. Yep, you can see there's some bunting up there. I think there's bunting around the bottom of the bridge. And all that is the red, white, and blue cloth that goes up there. But you can just see all those people on the pier. And that's what I remember. It actually, again, chokes me up thinking is getting up there. And there were boats in the St. Johns River, so Mayport Naval Base is right there at the mouth of the St. Johns River, so there were just tons of boats there. There were helicopters, there was a blimp, a ton of people, family member and friends on the pier, greeting us, cheering us. And I was up on that flight deck, just taking all of this in. And I have never been more proud to be an American, to serve in the military, and more specifically to be a U.S. sailor than I was that day. Coming back and hearing the cheering and the applause and the music, and knowing that all of those people out there, even those that weren't family or friends of a sailor directly, but just Americans, that appreciated what we had done, the sacrifices we had made. It stirred my soul. It made me feel proud. Doesn't even begin to describe it. I really can't put into words how I felt that day. But I remember, as we got in, hearing all that, of course, the thing was, I want to get off the ship. I want to get down and see my girlfriend. I want to see my mom and dad. I honestly, I didn't even know who was going to be there. I didn't really know, honestly, if anybody was going to be there. Again, this was before email. This was before Facebook. This was before any of that social media. It was all, letters. So, yeah, I know folks intended to try to be there, but I didn't even know if they knew exactly when we were pulling in. So, anyway, we got close to the pier. Tug snugged us up. We, secured all the lines, and went down to my berthing space to get all my stuff because I had been approved for leave. And so the way they do that, when you pull up, you pull in off one of those deployments, they let you go. They don't just turn everybody loose. It's 5,000-ish men trying to get off a single ship. So they usually stagger it. And of course, in the military, rank has its privileges. So that's how it's usually done, by rank. Now, when you come off a long deployment like this, they do it a little bit differently. So we got us pulled in. They got brows down, and the brows of the gangways, or the little bridges you take that go from the ship to the shore to get off. So they secured more than the two brows we normally have. So typically we have a brow on near the bow, and one on the elevator, or one of the sponsons just aft of the island, down at the hangar bay level, right? And that's for the enlisted. The one up near the bow is for the officers. And that's usually how we get on and off the ship. This time they had, I don't remember, 6 brows or gangways set up to get more people off the ship faster, which I'm glad they did this. So first thing they called away was new fathers. There were obviously sailors that had deployed when their wives were pregnant and being gone for 8.5 months. Pretty much all of those had given birth. So we had a lot of new fathers that were allowed off the boat to go see their babies for the very first time, their sons, their daughters that they had not laid eyes on at all. So they were able to depart. Um, and then next they started with the officers. So again, they would do several officers based on rank. And then they got to the enlisted. Of course, the chiefs would go first, and then it would be E6 and above, and then E5. And that's me. I was a second class petty officer in E5. So when they called that away, I was heading down the ladder out of our berthing space as fast as I can. I got down to the hangar bay where the brows connect. I see all the brows, and they'd set them up by alphabetical order, right? So they had the officers, and then they had, you know, A through D and E through G and so on. And I looked at is my last name, Corbin. I saw the A through D, and the line for it was just huge. It was going down from Hangar Bay 1, which is near the front of the ship, all the way back to Hangar Bay 3, which is near the back of the ship, or the stern. And I was like, well, that's ridiculous. But then I saw the far one, which was for, you know, Q through Z or something like that. And the line for it was really short. I'm like, I wonder. So I got in that line, and it moved. And I got up to the watch that was there, verifying everybody was allowed to leave the ship. Had my ID out, and had my leave orders in my pocket if I need them. He saw my ID. He saluted me. Permission to go ashore granted, and off I went. So, yay, it worked. My employee worked. I got off the boat, got down to the pier, and I'm just looking. Who's here? Because the pier was just crowded with people. And I'm looking, and I'm calling. And somewhere in the midst, I met my friend's, Don Gibbons' wife, at that time. They're now divorced, sadly, Marnie. And she was like, where's Don? Where's Don? I said, well, he's probably coming off the brow up there that I should have gone off of, or near. So she went off there. Next one, and I suddenly run into, almost literally, one of my wife's best friends, Tyra Mitchell, now Tyra Burton, and gave her a hug. And it's like, she's like, Polly's here. Polly's here. And before she could get the words out, I am tackled in a big hug, and it's Polly, just giving me the biggest and greatest hug I think I've ever had. And it was wonderful, just holding on to her for the first time in 8.5 months, after we'd had some issues during the cruise with her being able to take me being deployed anyway. But there she was, hugging me, and I don't think I ever wanted to let her go. And obviously, I guess you could say I haven't, because she's now my wife, and has been for almost 30 years now. And that was just, at that time, just time kind of stopped as I held her. And eventually, obviously, we parted, and by then, my mom and dad were there, and her mother was there, gave them all big hugs. And it was an amazing reunion. And again, we had the music playing, local radio stations, all the patriotic kind of songs going on. And just, so from there, you know, we went off, got into a car together. I think I ended up, you know, this was before all the mandatory seatbelt stuff, where we didn't really care. If I remember correctly, I think I ended up with Polly in my lap to get us all in one vehicle. And coming out of Mayport and going down Mayport Road from the entrance, people lining that road with flags, waving and cheering. And it was just an amazing experience to go through that and to feel that. And I've talked to friends that are Vietnam veterans, and they certainly didn't get that kind of welcome. And I feel bad and guilty that I did get the welcome that we got. And many of us weren't deployed nearly as long as they were, didn't face a lot of the combat hardships that they did. And they came back, and instead of a grateful nation, they got a hateful nation. They got spit on and whatnot. So I think the part of the reason we got that big turnout and that big welcome was because I believe that maybe the American people realized the injustice that the Vietnam veterans were showing. That they really didn't have a choice. A lot of them were drafted and sent over there, not because they wanted to be, but because they were forced to be. And even those that had volunteered for the armed forces, again, they were just following orders. They didn't ask necessarily to go to that conflict. And it's not really, you have a choice. If you disagree with the conflict, you can't really tell the Navy, I'm not going, or the Army, or the Marines, or the Air Force, or even the Coast Guard. You have to go. And so I think we recognize that as a nation, and learned a lesson, I hope, from that. I think we have, because you see the support our troops and all that going on now, even with the war on terror still kind of running on now for 20 years plus, that we still, while we may not agree with the conflict, we may not agree with the administration in office, we recognize that our troops are just doing the best they can to help protect us, our freedoms, and that they sacrifice and their families sacrifice a lot for that. So I think, again, maybe that outpouring was a recognition of that, and not just, thanking us specifically, those of us coming back from the Desert Storm, but thanking in a kind of another way of thanking the veterans of Vietnam. Maybe I know I try to, if I see a Vietnam veteran, thank them, because I know they didn't get thanked when they came home. They got a lot worse. Not, I mean a lot worse than not just being not thanked, but slapped, spit on, things thrown at them that they did not deserve. So I want to, on this anniversary of my return from Desert Storm, coming home, I want to give you, Vietnam veterans, my own personal thank you and welcome home. I'm sorry you had to go through that. I'm sorry you didn't get the welcome you deserve, but no, you are appreciated and your sacrifices are acknowledged. So with that, guys, I'm going to call it a video. I hope you've enjoyed it. Like I said, I try to share these remembrances, not only with you, but so my family has some record of them. We'll have more content on the Stang coming up. I did order the final components for the EFI system from Holley today. I know they're on back order, so I don't know when they're going to be here. But when they do, we'll get that. I've got also some touch-up paint. I found some places like under the doors here that I need to clean up and paint, and those were originally painted body color. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with the touch-up paint, because it's still going to be not the same color, because this is faded as that, but I don't know. My wife really wants the car repainted. She doesn't like the patina look, and since she's been really supportive of this, I may do that. So anyway, please don't forget about the merch store. We can get some wonderful shirts like this one that I have on here, as well as t-shirts, coffee mugs, and so on. And again, all of that, the sales from that help for support my efforts on this car, because it ain't cheap. Again, if you liked the video, give it a thumbs down. If you didn't like the video, give it, or back that up. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't like the video, give it a thumbs down. If you're not subscribed, please do hit the notification bell so you'll know when we post new videos. And I think that's about it, guys. I look forward to seeing y'all in the next video.